Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jessica Mayo. I am a co-director at the MICA project, and I will not be the only one speaking today, but I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves when they speak. We are really happy to have this opportunity to come together in community today. It's not something that we always have the opportunity to do on days like this, when maybe we don't always have the most hope or excitement about what's coming next. But for me, being together in a group like this really gives me a lot of hope and purpose that I wouldn't otherwise be feeling. So today is Martin Luther King Day. And I really like this quote because I think this is the epitome of a time for vigorous and positive action. And so I am grateful that we get an opportunity to talk today about all of those ways that we can do that together. Martin Luther King also talks about the beloved community. And so that is one of the ways that gathering together today, both on Zoom and in person, we get a little opportunity to do that. We do have some people in the room with us. So if you see me looking around, those of you who are on Zoom, that's why. We will be sharing some things in the chat. You will get a copy of this PowerPoint so that you'll have all of the links if you're not able to get to them as you're watching the presentation. We are going to start the day talking a little bit about some of the expected changes under the new administration. We've all heard a lot about that, so we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about it, but to give a sense of the urgency and what we'll be facing. Then we're going to talk about MICA's specific plans to address that. And then we'll talk a lot about some critical actions that you guys can take and ways to get involved. I think that is it. So I'm going to pass it over to Remy.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Remy. I'm a staff attorney at MICA. Obviously, this is a scary time. We're not going to downplay that, but also past presidents and parties have not been pro-immigrant either. So this slide kind of explains our country's history of racism and just having very anti-immigrant policies. So I want to talk a little bit about how Trump is able to make changes to immigration. So he can issue executive orders. So an executive order is a signed statement from the president that instructs federal agencies and has the fourth law. So he himself cannot make new laws about immigration. That's Congress's job, but he's able to utilize these executive orders to make changes and determine how to enforce the current laws that we have. So one example is creating program DACA or setting enforcement priorities. So we do know that we're going to see increased enforcement. This doesn't necessarily mean armies of officers on the street, but we are expecting increased detentions starting today and going onward. So we definitely don't want to spread fear and have people freaking out about these huge detentions, but we want to be realistic that there are going to be increased detentions. So there's going to be a higher risk for people who have either prior deportation or people who have a background of criminal history. Because realistically, every single person who's undocumented isn't going to be targeted. So he is talking about targeting people with criminal history or someone who has a prior order of removal. Trump is also going to attempt to reduce existing pathways to legal status or to permanent status here. So one thing is going to be the dissemination of the asylum system. So it's already really difficult to win an asylum case. In Kansas City, we only have 3 judges. They have very high denial rates. In fact, one judge denies, I'd say 99% of cases. So it's already an uphill battle, but we expect it to get even more difficult to win an asylum case. And we do likely going to see restrictions on family immigration. So there's been in the past, there's been public charge measures being taken, kind of like a wealth test, so we're expecting that to be reenacted. We do expect there could be some, so right now with DACA, there's ongoing litigation. We definitely don't expect Trump to support the DACA program, if that does get overturned in court, if we do get a decision on that. So that's another challenge that we're facing. We also expect Trump to reduce incoming immigration. So this is gonna look like a lot of the things that he did during his first presidency, he's gonna be reenacting those. So border closures, expanding the wall. Every year there's a number of refugees who are allowed in. We expect that number to be reduced. He's talking about reenacting something like Title 42 to be able to close the border on the premises that he's doing it to prevent the spread of disease. You know, we had the Muslim ban, which was banning people from predominantly Muslim countries from entering the United States. We expect that to be possibly be reenacted. And then he's also making it more difficult for visa applications. So the first time around, so for H-1B visas, which are worker visas for highly skilled workers, there were a lot of denials or just challenges to those. So that's something else that we're expecting.
Oh, great. I'm up. Hello, everyone. I'm going to turn on my camera and let's see if, why isn't this working? There we go. Let me know in the chat if there's any issue with my audio, but I'm sitting next to our little microphone, so hopefully this will work and not get feedback. Except we have lost
Working on it.
momentarily, although not on my Zoom screen. So
Yeah, I
that's
think you
interesting. Hopefully you all can see the screen. There we go. Talk a little bit now about sort of where the MICA project has been for these past couple months and where we are headed as we look to these next 4 years. And talking about the ways that our work will shift, but also how we will stay true to our mission to work with immigrants to overcome barriers to justice and what that will look like here starting today. So as always, we have taken a multi sort of pronged approach to the way that we work with immigrants to overcome barriers to justice. Clearly, our sort of wheelhouse and our strength is in the legal services that we can provide. But we have always tried to do that in a way that doesn't ignore the other realities that exist for immigrants and works to, through our client support services, help them connect to other resources, through our involvement with advocacy efforts to try to address sort of policy reality and the sort of oppressive systems that dictate the way we can work on legal cases, to work towards a more just future. And so all of those things will remain central to sort of the ways that we show up in this second round of a Trump administration, including working very closely, as always, but even closer with community partners as well. So the thing that we were able to, for better or worse, jump right back into was a lot of the same work that we did during the first Trump administration to work as hard as possible, especially in this month leading up to the inauguration, to provide information, mostly in the form of Know Your Rights presentations. And so several of the photos that you see here, I guess the bottom left and bottom center, are Know Your Rights presentations at different, one is at an area school, another one is at an area church, to educate folks about their rights. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation, but that's been a part of sort of our immediate response, knowing that the more people that know about their rights and the more that individuals know about their individual rights, the stronger our community will be in responding. The ways that we set folks up to protect themselves and their communities is going to hopefully move the needle when it comes to the deportation machine or enforcement actions. And we really hope that we have started spreading and will continue to spread that knowledge. Additionally, the other photos here that you can see are from the first couple power of attorney workshops that we were able to put on. Some folks here in the room and maybe some of you on Zoom were able to show up as volunteers. So generally those are workshops where we are working with folks, volunteer attorneys come out paired with an interpreter to help undocumented community members prepare a power of attorney document. So I'll talk a little bit more about why that's important. But again, a way that we've tried to help people create the tools that they might use to protect themselves in the event of an emergency, like a detention or a deportation. And so we will continue to do those things. As I said, we sort of tried as much as we could in the month over the holidays to show up in those ways, but those will continue. We hope that you will come out to volunteer if you're interested or able. And also that you'll just know that that is sort of a big piece of how we're showing up these days. Oh, yes,
Hi.
and that even, or in the ones that we've done, we did one in late November, a couple in December, and then a couple this month. We've worked with about 900 people in close collaboration with Catholic Immigration Law Project of St. Francis Community Services, and with support from other orgs as well. And then for any of you who are at all acquainted sort of with the immigrant community, I think there is a general understanding that MICA is very limited in the capacity that we have to take on full legal cases. That's due to a lot of factors. We have grown a lot, thank goodness. We have lots more legal representatives and attorneys than we ever had in the past. However, immigration cases are more time intensive and long than they have ever been. And so when we sign up an asylum case, we are signing on for full representation. We're thinking about working with someone for anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 years. So it makes it very hard to perpetually be opening cases if you can never close any because of the backlogs and the length of time that things take. So we have worked over these past few years to figure out sort of where those limits are, to try to figure out how to respect our capacity and the ways in which we can best utilize the limited resources that we have. And we recognize that now more than ever, there is a great need for sort of a screening or a consultation or a space to get legal advice for folks, especially those who aren't necessarily recent arrivals, which has been a lot of our work in the last few years, asylum seekers and such, but folks who have been here for many years, often decades, and who maybe want to know if there's anything they can do. As we know, our immigration laws are incredibly limited in the options they do provide for the undocumented community in regards to sort of regularizing their status or obtaining legal status. But we want folks to feel like they have had access to a high quality legal consultation, that they have answers if there are any, and if there aren't, that they can trust that they've been advised of anything that does exist, and then including, of course, those sort of know your rights and other political education sort of pieces in what we hand to people after those consults. So starting next week, we will have a weekly day for community consults. Folks will be able to sign up. And our hope is that there will be far less people saying, I've just tried calling the MICA Project so many times, because they will hopefully be able to get an appointment and be able to talk to someone at minimum. And we will focus our sort of full representation on cases in limited categories, I guess, to summarize. Did I forget everything?
You can go ahead.
I think we can go ahead.
I have a person who is an asylum seeker. At what they need legal representation? Because like you said, 5-7 years is a really long time, right? But somebody who entered last year doesn't have a court date until like what, 2028, 2029?
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
May I do this next slide and answer your question at the same
Can
time?
you repeat the question
Yes.
for those on Zoom?
So the question for those of you on Zoom, if you weren't able to hear, is at what point in the process does a recently arrived asylum seeker need representation? So for example, they may have arrived less than a year ago, but their court date or certainly their final court date might not be till 2028 or 2029. And so a piece of that is, yes, recognizing that historically we might have, met that person within that that first year that they're here, which is very important that they do take some action. You must file an asylum application within your first year of arrival. But then often your initial court date might not be for several years. And then of course, your final sort of like trial type hearing is even further out. And so what we have developed is sort of a robust pro se or limited representation where we are assisting asylum applicants, asylum seekers with filling out their asylum application, getting it appropriately filed in that first year of arrival, ideally, or outside of that first year. But to get that on file, it allows them to 5 months later apply for work authorization and sort of open some doors in that interim time where they're awaiting their court hearing. And so we will put sort of even more of our time into these limited touches to be able to prepare applications and give folks sort of initial orientation to the legal process. And then maybe providing representation much later at the like final hearing date, where we could prepare folks either to represent themselves or to actually go and represent. So we don't have all the answers about what that's going to look like. So very important that asylum seekers do at least get limited assistance in that first year, and then may be able to wait until like to hire an attorney or to be signed on for sort of full representation until like closer to their trial, if that makes sense. People can apply. There's a question in the chat about applying for asylum after the 1 year. Yes, there is, the asylum laws are complex, but the simple version is in order to qualify for asylum without having to qualify for an exception, you have to have filed your asylum application within 1 year of arrival. Folks who apply outside of the year after arrival may be eligible for some protection. There's something called withholding of removal. There's protection under the Convention Against Torture, other sort of lesser forms of protection that have a higher burden of proof, but they're not barred from applying just because it's after the 1 year, at least at this point. Trying to advance the slides here. There we go.
So another part of Micah's work is advocacy. It's not something we've necessarily done a ton of in the past, but over the last year or so, it formed a staff committee, advocacy committee, and they really began expanding our work in this area. And these are kind of the 4 main categories. There's local advocacy, statewide advocacy, community engagement, which is kind of this, talking with folks who are maybe the non-immigrant community, but giving them information and about how to take action. And then also messaging. We've been tried from our very beginning to be very intentional about how we talk about the immigrant population. And that has become even more important as the public narrative has become more negative. So you also might notice there's not federal advocacy on that. Most immigration law is at a federal level. And thankfully, there's some really great national organizations that really take the lead on that. So it's not really up to us to analyze the opportunities at the federal level, and we can really focus our efforts on more local and state level work. So these are a couple things from last year. We generally participate in a lobby day each year. I have information later on in the presentation about the one that's coming up this year in February. It is being co-hosted by the Missouri Immigration Policy Coalition, of which Micah is a part. We also have done, so we do a lot with the Missouri Immigration Policy Coalition, which does have like a very small part-time lobbyist in Jefferson City to keep us updated. And then also some things that are outside of that, such as here, one of our attorneys, Patrick, is testifying before a committee that was investigating immigrant crimes in Missouri. And so we put out a statement and also testified in that. I don't know how many of you have heard on this. There is a proposed law in Missouri that would allow people to get money for finding and turning in undocumented immigrants. So that's something we really strongly oppose and are working with the Missouri Immigration Policy Coalition to come up with some good action on. So that's something to kind of be paying attention to. My initial reaction to this was to just ignore it. So outrageous, and I didn't want to give it any more credence, but it's gotten a ton of press. So it is something that if it actually moves into committee and seems to be making some progress, we'll be letting you know how you can take action.
And I think unfortunately, sorry, just on that, the proposed bill and it is done lot of damage already. I think in the community, when we go out and do these presentations, we get multiple questions, and certainly, you know, collective assent that just like, this is really disturbing, or my kids came home from school talking about it. And so I think that's the really infuriating part, is even though I can assure them this isn't likely to become law, or at least I feel like I can assure them of that, or I can certainly say it's not a law yet. It's really heartbreaking to see how just this kind of rhetoric and the way that our state decides to talk about these things really does damage, even if it's never going to make it, you know, out of committee. So
this is an example of some federal level advocacy that is being done, not really by the MICA project, but we are sharing it because it is important. This is about the Lake and Riley Act, which we have a link later on that is shorter than that, or maybe it's a QR code, so that you can take action. It's moving forward very quickly. And so the more people we can get to take action against that, the better. If you get the MICA emails, there was also a link in there that you can follow to submit your opposition to this bill. Our local advocacy has taken a couple of different forms. We have been, some of our clients were involved in some work to oppose unfair labor practices by Amazon subcontractors that they were working for. We've also been putting out statements such as against the proposed resolution in St. Charles. Thank you. The big thing, this kind of goes in with our messaging, is that we really want to stop the us versus them aspect of the narrative. We hear so much about how some people are doing things the right way, or some people aren't, or about how there are legal immigrants. The big opposition to the St. Charles resolution was that the International Institute's work, which is what led St. Charles to propose this resolution that they oppose illegal immigrants. And so the big argument against it was that, oh, but the International Institute is inviting legal immigrants here. And so that kind of distinction is perhaps relevant to a debate, but it also then makes it be like, oh, but it wouldn't be bad to oppose those who aren't legal. And the distinction between the two is actually very thin. Things are very gray in immigration law, and ultimately everyone would like to do it the right way if the pathways existed. So we're really trying to find ways to advance a narrative of the dignity of all people rather than people who are doing it right or wrong. So now we're going to talk about taking action, because that was how we started and probably why many of you are here today. And I really like this quote about how coming together is, again, really one of the ways that we're going to create action. This is, sorry,
Nope.
keep taking it back. Some of you may have seen this. This is a guide we created for people to take action in the community. It's been on our socials and in our mass emails that go out. I'm happy to, I'll include a link to it in the follow-up email after this presentation as well. But this really goes into a lot of depth. We are going to go through a few slides of this, but not a ton of slides today, to kind of give some context for starting to take action. That's still me. We're not sure who's doing this slide. So we're skipping ahead a little bit in the guide, but one of the basic places to start is to recognize your own privilege. And for those of us who are not having to be afraid that a bounty hunter is going to come pick us up or pick up our parents, that is very much citizenship or legal status privilege. So regardless of the other challenges we may have had in our lives, which maybe we don't have privilege in other aspects of our lives, this piece is really important. And being aware of that as we go into the next 4 years, and also the intersectionality of all of these issues. Again, today is Martin Luther King Day, and Black immigrants are targeted for enforcement more than non-Black immigrants are. There are many ways that the immigration system intersects with a lot of other problems in our society. And this is a really great place to start. These are links that will be in the version I send out and also in that larger guide. this is another thing you can kind of take note of. And if you want those links, you can go to the guide or the documents I sent out afterwards. But again, I think we have a lot to learn from our neighbors who have been active in different aspects of the Black Lives Matter movement or kind of opposing police brutality. And we all kind of need to step up if we haven't already been doing it and be ready to take action if we see enforcement taking place, and perhaps do this as well if you see, you know, in police enforcement against a Black person or other person of color. But those guides and apps are specifically for immigration enforcement. It's important if you're doing this, don't live stream it because that could really put some people at danger. It might not be good for these immigrants to have their faces and their arrests being live streamed. So reaching out and figuring out where to send that after the fact is a great plan. The guide that is on there talks you through your rights to record. Just make sure you stay out of the way. You have the right to do it. Don't be confrontational. And then whether you're recording or not, if you hear that raids are happening, not going and posting online like publicly about it is really recommended. There, again, with all of the fear in the community, unless we have a confirmed raid or enforcement action taking place, that's not information we want to be spreading to anyone who can get that information. We want people to make sure they're getting trusted information and not just being afraid to even leave their house.
Great. Just wanted to go through a little bit of our sort of know your rights materials, but obviously this time in English. And for those of you who might not be aware, this is the kind of thing that we give these presentations, and I try to give some assurances or make some even promises to community members about how we can be there for them. And at the end, I always say, and I'm going to ask just one thing of you all, that you tell someone something that you learned today. And so I think the goal of sharing this with you all is so that you are aware of rights that people have in this country, no matter their immigration status, and that maybe you are able to share this, whether it's to an immigrant community member or just another community member, so that we can all sort of be aware. I got some great graphics off of mijente.net, just so you know, some of these are from there. I find them to be a really, really great source. But we hope that folks can learn about their rights to be in order to defend themselves and their communities. And so the rights that folks have in this country fall in several buckets, but doesn't matter your immigration status, you still have a right to privacy, and a right to process. Still today, and the most important of them is probably the right to remain silent. Of course, freedom from discrimination is a hope that we can have, freedom of speech. Folks have a right to assemble. So sort of those basic fundamental rights that we think about. It doesn't matter if you are a non-citizen, you can still expect to have those things. So we go through this presentation, sort of this expectation of privacy, or the right to privacy varies, or the degree of that protection depends on the place in which you find yourself. And so we walk through sort of, if you're at home, these are the types of rights that you have. There is no obligation to open the door to law enforcement, only in very, very limited contexts. If they have a judicial warrant, which we'll look a little bit at those, would you ever be obligated to open the door? But like 999 times out of 1,000, they will not have the paperwork that requires you to open the door. So we talk to folks about that. We talk about, sort of talking to your family and making a plan about who does answer the door at this house, or what our plan is if they do come in, what will we do or not do, or and so not consenting to those, to allowing them to come in, which includes even opening the door a little bit. They will, of course, sort of say whatever they need to say to have you open the door. So there's lots of different sort of typical tricks that they pull, or we just want to ask questions, or so we're just looking for someone who doesn't live here. But what we did see, and what I foresee for what we did see under Trump 1, what I foresee for this upcoming administration is, even if they can ostensibly say we're just going after folks with, previous criminal histories, they will very happily arrest collateral people in those enforcement actions. And so that's why it's almost, sort of more important that even if they have this guise of, oh no, That's not our goal. That's not what we came out to do. They'll still do it as, it's easy. If if you open yourself up to that. And I also sort of try to frame and would encourage all of us to sort of, there is a power in knowing your rights and the power in the ability to protect yourself by exercising your rights. And so if you don't show an ID from a different country, if you don't say anything about your legal status, they do not have the legal right to arrest you. And so that you sort of, put yourself in that place of power, not a sort of inactive participant, but rather the one who has the ability to make sure that you don't get arrested by exercising these rights. I'm gonna not spend a ton of time of this, but the really confusing thing is that what the paperwork that ICE will have almost all the time is this paperwork. You'll see that it says Department of Homeland Security. That feels really official. It even says warrant because we all know that that is what gives law enforcement the right to arrest someone. However, it's not a warrant that requires someone to open the door because it's not signed by a judge. This is an administrative warrant. It will have often someone who lives in my home or my name on it if they're showing up at my house, but it doesn't mean that I have to open the door. And so what we emphasize, I might have deleted, whoops. On my other slide, it's like side by side. There's another one that has a judge's signature on it and says like Department of Justice, not Department of Homeland Security, or says Court of Appeals. It has to be from a court, a federal court. And those are only issued in like serious criminal matters like drug trafficking or human smuggling or possibly like real serious aggravated on like unlawful reentry or something. But we have never had anyone like in the context where like they showed up with an actual warrant. So just don't open the door. In public, this is the other way that, again, we haven't seen this happen in St. Louis. I think for better or worse, St. Louis will hopefully not be the place where things like start to ramp up. We will see things happen in other parts of the country and be able to sort of learn what's happening. But that has not happened where we just see, ICE like roaming the streets, or certainly like here on Cherokee, thank goodness, up until now, that has not been a thing. Still important to know what rights you have, and essentially unless you are under lawful arrest, you have the right to leave. And so asking if you have the right, am I free to go or under arrest? And if you are free to go or you're not under arrest, then you walk away. The other thing we have, and people may have heard about, it seems that this is, folks are really informed about this, which I'm really happy about, but this is not a red card, but it is the famous red card information. They are little know your rights cards. Oh yes, she's going to show it to thank you. Know your rights cards that there's an organization that sends them out for free. You don't have to pay for them. Mike has ordered a bunch. They haven't come yet. But this is the same information, but essentially on one side, it reminds the person in like this one's in Spanish of their rights. So it's for like me to reference as the immigrant. And on the other side, it says, I'm giving you this card because I'm exercising my right to remain silent. So I recognize, again, when I do these presentations, like Nicole can't imagine facing a law enforcement officer and being like, I will not answer your questions. Please leave my home. But if I even if I'm like scared, scared pantsless, and I just hold this up and close my mouth, like that's enough. And so that's why this card, I think, feels like a tool and feels like a thing. So we have some of these available if you would like to take some with you, if you think you'll put them to use or have a place where you could put them out. Encourage you to do so and appreciate you doing so. The other thing that is, just to sort of reiterate what I was saying about trying to empower people to feel like they have the control, is, again, without like the evidence or clue that ICE needs to arrest someone. They can't arrest people just because they're brown. They can't arrest people just because they're speaking Spanish. They can't arrest people just because they're in a place where immigrants gather, right? Unless they have reasonable suspicion that you do not have lawful status, they can't make an arrest. So important things to remember as we understand rights. This is a little bit redundant of the information that Jessica just talked about filming or recording. But are things I would suggest people keep in mind and hopefully are able to show up boldly. If you ever do see ICE action anywhere, you know, filming openly, not getting in the way. If you're told to back off, back off. If you're told to put your phone away, just do it because it's better to avoid issue, but that you have a legal right to be doing it. And I think, yeah, just assessing safety, making sure you're not putting other people at risk just for your desire to like be a hero. But also it can be really helpful. So try to do that. And you don't have to give your phone to them if they ask for it.
Second,
Yes.
on that second bullet, what you said verbally was different than what it says there.
Yes, there's another slide that I show at the presentations that where I say sort of like, if you're told to stop recording, like maybe just do it. I think as if you feel like you have the privilege of not being subject to like ICE arrest, like push it because you do have the legal right to film. So I did give the advice that I give to immigrant audiences. So you're right. I would say we should all stand up to
Yes.
to ICE if they're telling us to stop recording. I'm gonna go through a couple more and then I see there's a couple questions in the chat coming up. Before I hand it off, we will take those. And this is just a little more about those power of attorney documents that I mentioned earlier. His font is incredibly small and I apologize for that. But these are legal documents that again, at these workshops that we're putting on, folks are able to sort of fully prepare if they come with the information. It requires naming an agent and sometimes a successor agent if you'd like 1 and 2. Someone who has to be of age, so over age 18, as it were, and ideally someone who has lawful status. That is something that I would say for those of us who might have connections with immigrant families. Not that we have to insert ourselves or push the issue, but if we do feel comfortable or like we have the kind of relationship where we could offer to be a trusted person to someone, we have a lot of undocumented folks who just really don't have anyone they trust or know well enough. And again, doing that in a way that doesn't center yourself or like force people to choose you. But ideally, someone with permanent lawful status. However, naming someone, even if they don't have lawful status, is better than naming no one and not putting together a power of attorney. What this document can do, there's actually 2 separate documents, so one for children and one for finances. So it allows the person named in a power of attorney to pick your children up from school, to take them to the doctor. If you were to be deported, they could certainly send them to you in home country. If you didn't get the passports before you left, it would allow them to, you know, basically any parental right that you as parent might exercise that allows them to do that under your direction. And for finances, the example here on the slide, and you know, anything from accessing your bank account to going to your employer and picking up your last paycheck or your last wad of cash because you get paid in cash, but allows the agent to sort of act on your behalf when it comes to financial decisions, sell a car, you know, withdraw money so you can make a bond payment. Those are all really important things that folks are sort of encouraged to think through when they're naming someone in their financial power of attorney. And it doesn't have to be the same person. You can do one person for one and one person for the other. That's a little bit about our power of attorney work. Let's check yes, I couldn't remember if there was another slide. Okay, sensitive locations. There's a question in the chat about the sensitive locations memo. So the sensitive location.
But you can do it too.
You do have a slide?
Mhm.
Great, she's gonna talk about that in just a minute. And we will make sure to address that. There's a question about in the state of Missouri, if you have to disclose your name before informing ICE that you wish to remain silent. I don't actually know the current answer to that question. It's a really good one. I would say that in the car you do says Remy. And I don't see, like, as an immigration attorney, any issue with saying your name and then saying you want to remain silent. Obviously, not saying a fake name or a false name is the advice that I give. But if this question was coming from someone with like a final order of deportation, I might actually want to see if there's a way that they have a legal right to like not give any name, right? It's a different level of risk. But it is something that actually I just mentioned we should try to figure out. So I'm sorry, I don't have a strong or like a solid answer to that.
I'm
We
okay.
are
I'm pretty good. Yeah, I'm like a little like
to, oh, sorry. Do you think he was, Ben, were you trying to answer the question? Ben Harbuck? I muted him because I thought he was just talking. Ben, you're welcome to come off mute if you were answering that question. I apologize. Question about Know Your Rights cards. We can include the link to like request. I think you're supposed to request like a chunk of them if you want to get them mailed from ILRC. We can send ours, these that we've formatted with ICER's information on them for folks to share. You're also welcome to come to the office, obviously, you want to pick some up. And yes, Dottie, I'm happy to send you we prepared last time some like shareable community resources for folks who wanted to get involved in emergency planning and helping the immigrant community. And we can also talk about the executive orders. Back to Jessica.
Talk about this, but
Nope.
can.
I didn't know.
There we go.
So now I'd like to talk about know your rights in context of the workplace. In case any of you are business owners or know people who are business owners and have employees who do not have status. So I know this is something that a lot of my clients have expressed fear about, even if they do have work authorization because they are waiting for their immigration hearing. So they do have work authorization, they have the right to be here because they're waiting for their asylum case, but they're still scared about going to work. So I want to talk about how employers can help protect their employees. So again, with the judicial warrant, so ICE can walk into any public space of a workplace just like anyone can, right? So you can walk into a store or a restaurant. So ICE agents can do the same. They cannot access private spaces. So what that's going to be is a break room that says employees only, or something in the back, like the stock room or something that, a member of the public's not going to walk into. An ICE agent cannot walk into those private spaces in a workplace unless they have the judicial warrant. Again, that's something that's going to have the person's name and then the signature of a judge. So what we want to make sure is that employers have these private spaces if they don't already exist, and make sure that their employees know that if an ICE agent does come to their workplace to conduct a raid, that they have a place where they can go and safely wait. So these private spaces, again, should be clearly designated. If it says, staff only, it's best if there's a door that can lock. And then I've been telling my clients, like, if they feel comfortable talking with their employer to kind of talk about this safe space that they can go to, or if they don't feel comfortable doing that, talking with their fellow employees to have a plan where, we don't want people running and taking off if ICE comes to the workplace, because that can create like suspicion and then give them a motive to arrest somebody. We don't want them running off. We don't want them using fake names. But if they can just, gather, agree to remain silent and not, exercise their right to privacy and wait in that private room, that is the best plan if there is an ICE raid in the workplace. So right now, places of work, school, and places of worship are considered sensitive locations. So there are spaces where ICE agents are not supposed to come to and conduct their enforcement activity, but we are expecting that Trump will eliminate the sensitive locations policy. So I want to talk about with schools. I know a lot of educators are concerned about how to protect their students who may not have status. So again, the private space would qualify. So again, an ICE agent can walk into the entrance of a school. I mean, as typically you can, but you can't go back into the classrooms. So if the students can wait inside a classroom, it's best if the door can close, if they can lock. The school is supposed to instruct the superintendent to speak with the ICE agent, and the superintendent should have training on how to, handle this situation with ICE agents, and they cannot give any personal information without the student's parents' consent. And again, if they have that judicial warrant, they can come in and go through, go into the more private areas of the school, but most times they're not going to have that judicial warrant. So for people worried about school, I think it's important for the educators to know that the ICE agent needs to talk with the superintendent, and they cannot just roam throughout the school looking for a specific student.
And as far as places of worship, I've looked and have not found any like toolkits like we have linked here for schools, but basically you're going to be looking at the same principles. What parts of the place of worship are open to the public, where are places that might be able to be marked off as private, and are the proper people instructed and trained on what to do if ICE does show up. Me. Yeah. Okay, so this is back to some of the information that is in that guide that we will send out. But I think coming to something like this is a great way to start getting the information you need to then be able to talk with other people. As I mentioned, we have really seen a shift in the political narrative. It used to be that at least one side of the political spectrum was pushing for more immigrant-friendly policies, and now we see that both major parties are really pushing for border enforcement and more limited routes. And so knowing the information we've shared today, learning some more with some of the links that are here or other resources you might have can really help for you to be having those conversations with people because ultimately we need things to shift back the other direction. And that can really only happen if we're out there advocating and sharing stories and sharing information when we have the opportunity to do so. Action alerts are another very tangible thing that we would really like to encourage you to do. Maybe everyone in this room has done them, but I have to admit that it is really hard for me to do them. Even when it's literally just click a link, fill in your information, send their pre-filled letter, I have a really hard time doing it. And ultimately, we really need you to do it. I've been pushing myself to do it. The opposition side, the people who are not supporting immigrants, have no problem hitting that link and sending the message saying that immigration needs to be stopped, and we need people showing up on the other side. So that can be at many different levels. We talked about the proposed bill at the state level. Sometimes there might be local action alerts as well, and we're going to get you a federal one in just a few minutes. Under the previous Trump administration, we had a big push for people to comment on a proposed federal rule. That's another place where it's really important, and it takes a little more effort because you really need to write your own individual letter with your own opinions and kind of point of view in order for it to be considered separately. But whenever a federal rule is proposed and there's an open comment period, they have to review every single comment that's made and then publish their responses. Not like one by one, but they're supposed to go through and get all of the different points being made for or against that rule. And then it often results in the rule.
Helen, do you guys want this book still? Or is this?
So that sometimes is a delay tactic, and sometimes it's an opportunity to actually make some positive changes in the proposed rules. I would encourage everyone to open up this link right now and do it. The one that's on our action alert is actually outdated. So if you have a way to open that QR code, that's the best way. For those of you on Zoom, I'll make sure we send out the link afterwards. It's also in our email from this morning. But the Lake and Riley Act is moving through this week. There have already been initial votes moving it forward. And so taking action on that is a great tangible thing you can do right now today. The people who are here in the room with us are following the QR code. So I'm going to give it just a few minutes. We wish all of you could be here in the room with us. We have too small of a room for us to open it up for everyone, but hopefully we'll have an opportunity to see everyone that's on this call soon. Okay, and I mentioned this earlier. This is the lobby day that's coming up, February 18th. It is being co-hosted by the Missouri Immigration Policy Coalition and the Hispanic Leaders Group, and they're kind of going in on it together. And usually when you go to this, they will have for you talking points and a list of legislators that they want you and maybe one or two other people to go and talk to. A lot of times the legislators might not actually be there. You might be talking with one of their aides, might just be leaving, kind of dropping off information. Other times you'll actually get to talk with people. If you get someone who's more friendly on our issues, it's kind of nice to be able to say, thank you for supporting immigrants. And yeah, some really good opportunities to push yourself to learn those talking points like we talked about earlier and to take action. And now it's back to you.
So it's back to me. In here. Video. Okay, just to wrap up, and I know we are almost out of time, but we just wanted to encourage folks to consider other ways that you might show up. Again, being here, whether it be in person or via Zoom, is huge. I appreciate you doing that. If you have more to give, I'd like you to consider some mutual aid suggestions here on this slide. There are certainly ways to put our dollars to work when it comes to showing up. And so supporting legal case expenses for folks who need to file applications and get to court hearings and all of those things. Bond funds, we do expect there to be a increase in detention, as we've talked about, and hopefully people will continue to be eligible for bond, but the minimum immigration bond is $1,500. And that's if you're basically like the cleanest, least offensive, least criminal record person ever. And they can go up, of course, into the thousands, if not beyond 10,000. So bond funds are really important. Again, mutual aid, thinking about other organizations that are putting together that at a national level, and also some here locally in the St. Louis community. Those are all linked here on this slide. And this is a slide from the guide that Jessica mentioned had previously been sent out and posted to our socials. And then in closing, of course, we would welcome your financial support of the MICA project. Many of you, again, both here in person and on Zoom, are monthly supporters, and we are so greatly appreciative of that. Again, because I know a lot of you personally as well, the pitch I gave to my family when I asked them to support us was, this is about to get really serious, and the more financial support we can have, the more time Jessica and Nicole can spend doing legal work. So realistically, we do a lot of our fundraising, and we do appreciate all of the ways, again, that you support us, be that financial or otherwise, but there's a QR code here. We know that legal representation does move the needle when it comes to fighting these unjust systems. There are no public defenders in immigration court. Have access to legal advice, again, even if it is just in the form of our community consults. People just don't know what options they do have or don't have. Often when they haven't consulted with an attorney that they trust and believe, they may fall prey to notarios or other people who are sort of holding themselves out as legal reps and sell them a song or sell them a dream that I certainly wish was true, but often isn't. Our children's project, so we provide specific sort of tailored representation for unaccompanied children. And we now thankfully have the help of 2 additional legal fellows, but we are accepting sort of more cases than ever for children who also don't have a right to an attorney that's paid for by the government. And again, having an attorney can really make it sort of even 5 to 10 more times more likely for folks to win in court, especially when it comes to asylum. So again, thank you for being here. We will leave you with one more QR code and another beautiful quote that Jessica found that I'm just going to read aloud. We live into what we imagine. Imagine the world as it could be. Paint that world. Sing that world. Invite it into your dreams. Practice that world in the space available for you. So we appreciate you all practicing with us today. And thank you again for being here. 2:59. Let's see if there's any more questions here.
If people want to stay on for question and answer, we'll just do about 5 more minutes on the Zoom for question and answer, and then we'll go ahead and turn it off.
Great.
I think I see something that one of the QR codes isn't working. I will do my best to get all of these functional and sent out hopefully this afternoon or tomorrow morning to everybody. Anyone in the room have questions?
Comments, first words?
Gotten some questions from the community already, like if there is a number, a hotline that's time around, if ICE is spotted in the community, like, is there someone to call? You know, I realize that last time around that was very volunteer based, coordinating, but if there are any updates on that would be great.
There is, and in fact, I would invite others who might be on the Zoom if you want to come off mute and update, but what I can tell you is, well, there is not, but there is a sense that we may need that. So there is a coalition, collaboration of us. Micah is involved and many other local partners trying to figure out, learn from other places who've done things like that, and see what we can implement here locally. But I guess the yes was, we are aware of that need as well. And certainly will be something that will disseminate and share out if and when something comes together.
There's a question about the new executive orders in Missouri. I don't have a ton of information about that, but the new governor did sign those on day one. And it's basically like a show your papers law where immigrants would have to show whether they have legal status or not to police. I think we are hoping that in some jurisdictions, there may be some work done where maybe they're not, where the police aren't necessarily doing that or not doing it in all situations, or at least some training to make sure they know what documents they're looking at, that like if someone has a work permit, that means they should not arrest that person for not having status because it is just very gray. I've been talking with a few people, including some in this room, about what is the right response and how that influences our Know Your Rights presentation, but don't have a lot of answers yet.
Jessica, do you have a follow-up question to that? Do you have any information about a legal challenge to those executive orders?
I have not heard anything about a legal challenge to the executive orders, but there should be one. So we're gonna
Sure hope so.
hope it happens.
I'm sorry, so you people at. They require you.
I'm gonna phone up Fred.
Dr. Carson on day one issued a couple of executive orders. Sorry,
Hi. Yes, I'm sorry, I said
No, you did.
Governor Kehoe, the new one, issued a couple of executive orders having to do with immigration, day one of which was a state 287G partnership, which is basically, it's a federal statute that would, he wants Missouri Highway Patrol to be trained as ICE officers, and then to empower to like be a part of the immigration customs enforcement process. So that's step one. The other piece that is this show your papers piece is changing the uniform crime reporting system to include and require immigration status. So this would mean that any police officer who encounters any person would have to indicate in the system something about their immigration status, which is deeply problematic and complicated. First of all, that like, I don't carry proof of US citizenship, like most of us don't, and most folks don't carry proof that they're, you know, that they're in, and status means a whole bunch of different things that is gonna be really hard to implement. So we don't have any further information about like how long that's gonna take to build that system. So it's both a software and a training thing that will happen before that actually rolls out. But it is his workaround to a state legislative show your papers law. But so there's gotta be funding, there's gotta be things like that. So it's gonna take some time. So that's not currently the case. But it would make it really hard for officers to not take that information. Like we can't be a sanctuary city because the state will strip all of our funding, things like that. They're just making it harder and harder for police to have discretion on how they interact with people as well. So does that answer your question? Yeah.
That was a great example of how much we appreciate our community and getting to just phone a friend, which we've literally done before with Annie. So, and many of you others, people here in the room, we have done similar things. So thank you all for joining us. We're going to go ahead and end the Zoom. We're so grateful for you being here, and keep an eye out for the email with a million links that you can follow for all of these opportunities to get to understand more and to take action. Thank you.